Howdy folks, thanks for tuning in for another Cruise of Smooth. Sorry it's been a while since I've been with you. I've been off work for about a week and a half now due to coronavirus concerns. Even though my company is wanting to ramp up production, there's still the government guidelines, and there's child care and whatnot that is currently out of commission. So it's we're still running at roughly 2/3 capacity, depending on who you ask. Before I get into it today, don't forget to like, share, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell. If there's anything you want to hear my opinion on, feel free to mention it. I wouldn't mind doing that a bit. I'd like to know what you guys are thinking about things. So I know that I haven't been on for a while, and basically with 2020 being the way it is, because you've got, on top of everything that's going on, a presidential primary in both parties. Bill Weld did attempt to primary President Trump unsuccessfully. And you've got the Democrat primaries and then the general election. Plus you've got, since February, March, coronavirus wall to wall. You've got George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery. I hope I'm pronouncing that name right. You've got everybody sounding off on all the topics, plus the opinion pieces that spring from them sounding off. I've heard, okay, I got a comment a while back, not upset. I am American. I do not know how to pronounce her name correctly. I've heard it pronounced 3 distinct different ways on various news broadcasts. So if I get it wrong, I apologize in advance. Greta Thunberg, however, everybody knows who I'm talking about. I apologize if I'm wrong. When she came on the news and was talking about coronavirus, there were discussion panels on various news sources and sites talking about her discussion panel. So the news is moving at such a pace, and there's so much out there that I don't even know where to start. I really don't. There's just an absolute plethora of starting points. There's so much information available to talk about. So I gotta admit that there's a lot of things that I don't agree with. A lot of the narratives that are out there. As an example, why is this dude stopped in the middle of the road? Okay. For example, the ACAB motto that's out there, I think that's stupid and divisive. I think that I've had dealings with good cops, personally. Now, I know that there's going to be someone out there that's thinking, well, that's just because you're white. No, I've dealt with some real pricks. I've dealt with some real jerks twice, but they had nothing on me. Because the one cop, he had 10 over in reckless driving, which in the state that I live in, 10 over can be constituted as reckless driving, provided you're doing another thing. I knew he had me. I whipped around a corner to get in the parking lot and wait for him. And he tried to say I took the turn too fast, so he wrote it as reckless driving. The other cop that was a real jerk, he pulled me over for a busted tail light. And the lens was busted, water got in, popped the bulb. So they had literally nothing on me that was citable for anything or arrest worthy. And that's the extent of the cops that I've run into that were real jerks. I've been I know I've been fortunate. I know part of that is the area that I live in. The areas where I have resided typically have relatively low crime to population density. And there's just not... So, in my opinion, you've got compounding issues contributing to situations like George Floyd and others. The first one is the black household single parent rate. There are proven statistics that without fathers in the house, life outcomes are worse for kids, specifically boys. All that is proven, verifiable, and it doesn't matter if you're black, white, whatever. However, the black community has the highest fatherless home rate of any ethnic community. And so the issues that come with fatherless homes, such as more likely to drop out of high school, more likely to have a criminal record, more likely to be in jail, more likely to end up in gang-related activities, all that comes down to the fatherless homes. And I think the likelihood that you end up in dropping out of high school is something like 7 times the rate of a dual parent household. So, I mean, we're not talking small numbers here. I think a lot of the problem with police, where you get cops that are brutal or exceeding their authority or whatnot, I think a lot of that springs from the fact that in a lot of cases they deal with these crime-ridden communities day in and day out, and their nerves are turned up to 11, and so they're always on high alert, waiting for the bad thing during the call to happen. So if they're out on the scene of a whatever, the call-in is. I think a lot of that anxiety or anxiousness or militant attitude comes from the fact that they deal with unsavory people all the time, and something always, they're always they always got to be ready for something to happen. So when they end up in a situation where nothing bad is going to happen, they've still got to have that amount of vigilance in order to keep themselves safe, or just out of habit. So I think that the high crime communities and the everything going sideways on a lot of calls has affected the police department as well as the communities. I think that's a vicious cycle. People are highly adaptable in the sense that you can take someone that has fears and phobias and is, a high school graduate, and that's one of the more difficult things they've ever done was to graduate high school, even as valedictorian. You put that person in a training camp for 3 months, 6 months, and you've popped out a Marine or a Navy SEAL or an Army Ranger, some of the more tough people on the planet, in just a few months. Now, they might have had physical training during football, but nothing like what's going to happen in those divisions of the service. Human beings are adaptable. A friend of mine is a retired Marine, and he said that at one of the points during his training, they do, I forget what he called it, but it's exhaustion training. They work to perpetually keep you tired. You'll go through 3 shifts of sergeants over the course of a day, and you're up 20 plus hours a day, or more. Sometimes you might be up more than 24 hours, but they basically push you to exhaustion to show you that you can overcome, to help you prove to you how tough you are, and to prove to you the difference in your performance when tired versus when rested. So I think that these guys are stone cold killers, kind of. Marines, they're tough. The Marine buddy that I know, he actually had to deal with the Coast Guard at one point because they had to train them in non-lethal takedown procedures. They were working with refugees, and in the event that one of them became violent, they needed to know non-lethal methods to take them down and handle them where they weren't going to cause any damage. He said Marines don't train for that. Once we get into a physical altercation, you end up dead. That was the way he was trained. So humans are highly adaptable in the things that they can cope with, but that does come with consequences. So I'm wondering if part of the problem is these cops that have been in these high crime and violent areas are preconditioned to just expect the worst to happen. I also think that organizations that like Black Lives Matter, while their charter statements are the word I'm looking for, agreeable. I don't think that they're attacking the issue in a correct, in a manner that matches the way things are in the world. 98% of, I don't want to say a specific statistic, but I know it is over. Garbage truck stopped right in a blind curve. I don't want to quote a actual number because I could be wrong, but I'm sure it's over. I know it's over 75%. Over 75% of all preventable deaths in the black community are what? Black on black death and violence. Cops, I forget the statistic I heard out of, this was done by a very reputable news source. I might find it and post it in the comments, I don't know. They showed the statistics of police violence or of black death, and cops are in the bottom percentages of what causes black death, preventable black death. So here's my opinion, and here's my entire take on Black Lives Matter. If you've got a boat and you've got a dozen leaks, or a ship and you've got a dozen leaks, water's coming into your ship, which one do you go for first? My opinion, you go for the one that's pouring in the most gallons of water. And I think that when you look at what causes preventable black deaths, the majority of them aren't police. Now, absolutely, Officer Chauvin should be prosecuted to the full extent of the law. I think that he acted in a way that he shouldn't have. I've also seen some of the deaths that Black Lives Matter protests where police did not act in accordance with their training, where they acted in the wrong, where they were not acting the way they should have. Absolutely. But that is a small percentage. In 2019, there were 9 unarmed black people that were killed by the police. Out of those, 3, and this is if I'm remembering the statistic right, and that number drops down to 3 if you don't count running from the police, resisting arrest, or attacking the officer. So, again, I'm not trying to make excuses for bad officer conduct, but I do think that a lot of people are having the wrong conversation. I think that the black community would do good to try to fix the biggest leak first. And if they get if at a point in time the deaths in the black community mirror any other community, where a teenage white boy, the most likely cause of his death is a car wreck, a teenage black boy, the most likely cause of his early death is going to be violence and firearms. So I think that if you dealt with all the other problems and got everything else mirrored, then we can talk about bias in the police force. And I think that if you look at the numbers objectively, you're not going to find near as many instances of police bias or potential racism in the police force as you think. There are bad actors everywhere. I've worked with some. I've known some people that were always looking to pick a fight over whatever. I've worked with some real jerks. I've worked with some real terrible people. I've worked with some real upstanding people. The people that are generally decent far outnumber those that are always out to start something. So I think that if you took a hard look and delved into all the police statistics, you would find that the information wouldn't match the narrative. There was two videos edited together that I saw a while back. One was a selfie video posted on Instagram or something like that. This woman was crying in her car after she had been pulled over and ticketed and allegedly racially profiled and discriminated against and threatened by the cop and all this, that, and the other. And she had his badge number and name and was putting him on notice on social media. Well, the police department responded by uploading the full body cam footage reel, start to finish, of this traffic encounter. All it was, woman was speeding enough to get pulled over. And everything that happened in that ticket contradicted what this woman said. Aside from the fact she got a ticket. I think that police departments are asked to do a impossible job on their budget. I think that cops are asked to do a job that they're grossly underpaid for. I think that if there were better training programs in place, and I think if cops knew what, and I think if communities in a lot of these places were better, I think that there would be a lot fewer issues. I think I seen a meme that, I know it's just memeing, but it made a lot of sense. Instead of rioting and looting, why not join the police academy and be the change you want to see in the community? Why not? There was one point in my life where I seriously considered becoming a cop. There's a police officer in the community I lived in for a number of years. I moved a few miles away a couple years back. The local law enforcement had a bunch of retiring officers. They were looking to get some newer officers in. I was unemployed at the time. I went to a job fair. Turns out I knew the head of PR for that police department, a police captain. Really fantastic guy. I got busted by my parents for doing something, and instead of grounding me and all that, they actually set me down and made me talk to this cop, and he said, if you have any questions about anything, never hesitate to call. Well, guess what? I never did. So I stayed in contact over the years with this police officer. I've known him now for about 16 years. Fantastic guy. I know his family. They're great people. Well, I went to a job fair this one time when I was unemployed. And he was there, so he and I talked for a little bit. And, kind of the ins and outs and how the process goes and whatnot. And the big determining factor for me on not applying to become a police officer, even though I did consider it because they were seriously looking for some decent recruits, is the money. The financial obligations that I had at the time could not have been paid for on my salary with me being a cop. Period.